Gators Breakdown episode 27 is live and ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, with co-host Joey V. Joey, how is it going?
It's going, man. Tough game on Saturday, but didn't expect them. It's tough because after watching that first drive and that first series I was like, wow, this team has come out with the tear on fire, and then the Alabama that we know and love to hate showed up. So
Yeah, they set us up for a little bit of hope, and it all came crashing down and in pretty bad fashion there. But yeah, Gators Breakdown. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, live on YouTube when we record this. Some of you watch it live and like that aspect of it. But thanks for watching. And biggest thing you can do is help share this thing. We've kind of blown up in the last month or so. We've kind of rebranded it after we lost the audio portion of this podcast for a little while. But month of November was really good heading into this stretch run. Big gains for the Gators, and I thank all you guys for listening to us. So, Joey, have a lot of going. Of course, season's basically over with, but a bowl game against Iowa still to come. I previewed that in the last podcast of what we can expect a little bit from Iowa and kind of their season in review, just quickly looking at their schedule. You excited about the Outback Bowl and the Gators playing in Tampa?
yeah, actually, I am. That's a fun game to go to, and I'm going to be there. I'm actually going to bring my son there. It's a good time. Actually, ironically, my first bowl game was the Outback Bowl in 2004 against Iowa when Chris Leak was a freshman. Bowl game I've ever been to in my life. It'll be nice to take my son and kind of, share that memory with him that I had, going to my first bowl game against Iowa. Kirk Ferentz was still coaching Iowa then. But the Zucker was roaming the sidelines for the University of Florida that year. And game, I remember Chris Leak looked like a true freshman in that game. Iowa had a really good defense that year. I remember they had players on that team. I'm looking forward to it. Iowa's defense is pretty good. Their offense is pretty bad, so maybe we match up pretty well. It's kind of like our counterpart in the Big Ten.
Yeah. They ended I mentioned it in the previous podcast. They ended the season on a pretty good run after they got trounced by Penn State. They went on a run to where they beat Michigan, of course. Gave Michigan their first loss of the season, and that was probably definitely if you go back and look at it, their biggest win in the season. But we'll break down the Iowa game in a couple of weeks. Of course, McElwain in a line of coaches. Muschamp didn't face Iowa, but you mentioned that Ron Zook did. Urban Meyer faced Iowa, and now Jim McElwain will get his shot at Iowa. And all, as Joey mentioned again, all of these guys coached against the one coach at Iowa, Kirk Ferentz. So the last 3 out of 4 Florida coaches have coached against the same coach at Iowa. But a lot of things going on at Florida, and it all really hinges and starts on the quarterback position, as most of the games do. We've seen how desperate Florida probably is going after quarterbacks now. And after the performances we've seen from Austin Appleby, have every right to be desperate. The big name on the board right now kind of just started coming out last week that the Gators, and as Joey and I talked about last week after the FSU game, Jim McElwain made a phone call to Jarrett Stidham from Baylor. He went to JUCO this past year. He's eligible to come and find another big-time program after sitting out from these FBS programs for a year. So now it looks like Auburn, looks like Florida, looks like he'll visit Florida, still kind of deciding. So as we're recording this podcast, Stidham still hasn't decided if he's going to visit Gainesville this weekend. But in my mind, he is the game changer that can come in right away and do something for this Florida offense. We briefly hit on Stidham last week, but we've got to know a little bit more this past week. So Joey, your thoughts on where Florida might stand, where Stidham is now. And I'll bring up your tweet today, and you and I kind of went back and forth. And I tweeted last week kind of on the same on the same subject, is it an indictment of Feleipe Franks and Kyle Trask of why Jim McElwain sees the need to go after Jarrett Stidham?
I did tweet that earlier, and you disagreed with me a little bit, but I do. I'm getting nervous about what the coaches actually think of those two. Really raw. We understand that, but Feleipe Franks was supposed to be the future of this program. 4-star, grew up 2.5 hours from Gainesville. Flipped him from LSU on a visit, and he was supposed to be the guy coming in. It kind of raised an alarm that he didn't win the job over Appleby a couple weeks ago when it was supposedly an open competition. But I figured, we talked about that at the time, that Appleby was the safer start. And while Florida still kind of had the future going for it for the season, still had we had an SEC championship to get to at the time. You even said that you would understand if Appleby was the starter at that time. But after how bad Appleby played in the game on Saturday, that they wouldn't even just throw him in there just to kind of see what he's got. I understand you don't want to burn the red shirt this late in the year and such, but what do the coaches really think of those two freshmen if they're not even willing to, because, the way the quarterback position has been played this season at the University of Florida, Nate from the Play 60 commercial would come in and throw a couple touchdowns with the way that this quarterback play has been. Jeez. So it worries me. And, I talked about this with you on Twitter earlier, that basically selling out to get Jarrett Stidham. We talked about the midnight phone call in the locker room at Florida State. After the season was over last year was Eddie Pinheiro. This year, it's Jarrett Stidham. Nuss and Mac flew to Texas yesterday to have an in-home with him last night. So this to me says that he's priority number one. To me says that neither one of your quarterbacks sitting behind Appleby and Del Rio are priority number one. So that worries me a little bit, Dave. And I must be honest with you, if Florida misses on Stidham, duck in another mediocre season of quarterback play next year.
I get the worry, I really do. And I think another worry is, what if the same thing the last couple of seasons happens and we're having to rely on a backup quarterback? If Stidham comes in, I think he's quarterback number one with his experience, his backup, or his history of being 4- or 5-star high school recruit in a big time state there. So it really think Jim McElwain's 2 seasons now, he's had to rely on a backup quarterback. He's had to go to a backup quarterback. If, say, you bring in Stidham and he gets hurt, you still have a good backup, I think, in Franks. I don't necessarily think it's an indictment on Franks and Trask yet. And I only say that because I've heard whispers of how good they've looked in practice. And I get the opposite side of that. If they've looked that good, why haven't we seen them play? And we've kind of hit on that is, maybe you don't burn the red shirt this late. But there's still rumors out there that they may pull the red shirt off of Franks and play him in the bowl game. So, if the one advantage right now is you're getting in early on Stidham, and he wants to make a decision in the next couple of weeks and be available to go in January. So I think, that gives the Florida coaches plenty of time to figure out what they want to do with Franks going into that in the bowl game. If Stidham comes, he commits to Florida and he's ready to go, you don't play Franks in that bowl game. You keep that red shirt on him. That's one thing I really think is the going forward. If you have Stidham, you don't play Franks in the bowl game. But to kind of go back to our point is, I'm leaning toward it's not an indictment on how if Franks and Trask are bad. If I go back, if Trask was going into the season, was the quarterback that, of course, through the spring, we saw how much better he performed in the spring game than Franks. Going into fall camp, I think he was ahead of Franks. But I heard once the coaching kind of got involved, Franks didn't have a lot of high school coaching, not much at all. And once these Florida coaches got a hold of him, McElwain and Nussmeier, something started to click. He started to look better in practice. Both of these guys got a lot of practice reps in, and both took to that, and really Franks did. So, if I didn't hear those things, I think I'd be a lot worried too. But we've seen this before, and we've heard it from Florida before, how good these quarterbacks look in practice, and they go out in a game-type situation, and it's nothing that we've heard through whispers. So, bringing Stidham in, he's an elite player. He's a game changer at the quarterback position. So that's why I don't necessarily think it's too much of an indictment. You're going and getting an elite guy, and you don't pass up elite guys if you can get them, especially what has happened these last 2 seasons at the quarterback position for Florida.
How good Luke Del Rio looked in practice for 2 years as well, Dave.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
No, let's take that with a grain of salt, okay? We could just do that right now.
Yep.
Because Luke Del Rio was supposed to be Jim McElwain's guy from not just this year, from the year before when the coaches reportedly were trying to get him eligible season. So I'm not, I 100% trust what you heard, and I don't doubt that, but I don't take it to the bank. Let's just say that. So I believe that if Stidham comes, Franks is going to transfer, because Stidham's a 3-year guy. He's got 3 years of eligibility. And you're right. He's quarterback number 1. And you know who's quarterback number 2? Luke Del Rio. I think Luke Del Rio is a very serviceable backup quarterback. I think he's one of the better backup quarterbacks in the SEC. I mean, we've seen Del Rio play decent in spurts. Fill in for a game or two, do all right. I mean, I think Luke Del Rio is made to be a backup quarterback. That's all he is. That's all he's going to be, is a backup quarterback. I think Franks is too much of an elite prospect for him to just sit for another 3 years and wait for Stidham to either get hurt or wait for him to leave for the draft. Because as you and I have talked about with Stidham, he's a program changer. There's people that have no ties to the University of Florida at all that have come out on Twitter and said, if he comes to Florida, the entire dynamic of Florida's offense. I mean, that right there tells you what talent this kid is. And deal with that, because Franks isn't going to beat Stidham out. Stidham has experience. He has game experience. Stidham, he was 12 touchdowns to 2 interceptions in 10 games. 9% completion percentage in 10 games. Starting quarterback going into the season, but he broke his ankle. Rape thing came out with Bryles, and Bryles got let go, and the entire football staff let go. He said, the heck with this, I'm out. Stidham wasn't he a Heisman contender up until his ankle last year? Wasn't he in the talks to be Heisman contender? Because Baylor was what? Baylor finished the season 11-1 last year.
Yeah, maybe would have been, consideration of going into the next season, because and I was looking at his stats. Yeah, we could pull it out. This part of the reason I wanted to talk about what he could bring to the table. He
9 quarterback rating in 10 games as a true freshman.
Didn't get the bulk of his, passing statistics until November 5th of 2015. So he made his first start against Kansas State November 5th in a 31-24 win. He was 23 of 33, 419 yards, a long of 81. His longest completion in that game was 81 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he had 1 rushing touchdown in that game as well. And then the very next week, against a playoff Oklahoma team, they lost 44-34. He was 16 of 27, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. And he had
only 2 interceptions. Those were his only 2 interceptions on the season.
There you go. And the very next week, he was 12 of 21 against Oklahoma State for 258 yards, 1 touchdown. And that was a game he got hurt in. And I went back and looked at that game a little bit. He was getting pounded in the first half of that game and didn't finish that game. He was then. So, if you look at probably defenses in the Big 12, which I know we joke about a lot, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, besides TCU are probably 3 of the top defenses in the Big 12. And that's where his stats came from. So his stats came from the best of the Big 12. And like I mentioned, they played, Kansas State speaks for itself under Bill Snyder and the tough defenses they have. Oklahoma was a playoff team last year. And, he led it to a 10-point It was Baylor's, I believe that was their first loss of that season. It was, yep. So, in a 44-34 loss. So, he has big game experience. He has experience coming in against tough defenses. I mean, he fits and checks marks that for and another thing, and a lot of people have shouted out on Twitter talking about this. Oh, we're tired of transfers. This guy is different. This is not your normal transfer. This is not a guy who couldn't make it.
This isn't a transfer that got booted out. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. This is not a guy who couldn't make it somewhere. This is a guy who decided to leave on his own decisions, as you mentioned, because, one, he didn't want to be affiliated with the whole Baylor rape scandal that was going on there. His head coach was gone when Art Briles got fired, and he saw that was a chance for him to leave and start anew. So, people who would say, oh, no, we need to start with our own fresh quarterbacks, get Franks or Trask in, this is the only quarterback I would disagree with that point on, because I can't say it again, and Joey mentioned it too. We're not the only one. Gator fans are not the only ones saying he's going to come in here and change this program. Bill King, I'm on his show every week. He was a big supporter. He talked about it on his Monday morning show that, he was talking about where should Stidham go, Florida or Auburn. Florida, he says Florida's a much better fit. And it is. Florida is a much better fit for Jarrett Stidham.
Mark Schlabach even said that.
Yes, yep. If he wants to get ready for the NFL, yes, Cam Newton, I know, is in the NFL from Auburn. Don't get me wrong, but still different types of skill sets there. If he wants to, and I'm not going to sit here and say Jim McElwain's been putting players in the NFL left and right. That's not what I'm trying to say. The system, for the way it sets up for quarterbacks, Jim McElwain's system is set up better than Gus Malzahn's system to put a quarterback in the NFL.
I'll say this about Jim McElwain's quarterbacks. Garrett Grayson is the heir apparent to Drew Brees in New Orleans. A.J. McCarron is going to be a free agent this year, or be traded rather, and there's talks of him possibly going to the Jets and being a starter next year, because we saw what he did in the playoffs last year for Cincinnati. Cincinnati should have won that game. Aaron is the starter. So, we can't sit here and say that his, record on court. He has quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And they're on rosters right now. And granted, they're both backup quarterbacks in your future. So, we know he knows quarterbacks. That the some bad see the steroid thing with Greer. I think Greer to the next level, and Greer a Heisman candidate this year if he had a whole season last year, and it truly just blows my mind how much of a quarterback away Florida is from a national championship. Could you imagine a good quarterback on this defense this year, David? It almost brings you to tears just to think about how much Florida's missing a quarterback. And like you said, Bill King said, for Stidham, Florida would love Stidham. It is a match made in heaven. Before the show started, why is Gus Malzahn throwing away Sean White? Sean White's been the best quarterback he's had in 4 years since Cam Newton. Sean White is the best quarterback Auburn's had since Cam Newton. He's stable. Yeah, he's had injuries, but injured. Wasn't Auburn supposed to be a championship game possibly? So, I don't know why they're throwing in the towel on Sean White, and then we get all this news about Auburn being in play for Malik Zaire and that other quarterback that's a transfer. Gus is trying to do is he just throwing like a bunch of darts at the wall and just hoping one sticks? Is that what he's doing, you think?
In a way, I kind of think maybe what Jim McElwain is doing as well. The more options you have, if something goes wrong, at least you can go to an option and you don't lose a beat in your offense. That's maybe what I can gather from it just a little bit. You can never have too many quarterbacks, and I think we've learned that lesson in the last couple of years. You never know what's going to happen. It can be a PED issue. It can be an injury. It can be whatever. you got to have somebody else ready to go. And it's kind of funny. As soon as you said A.J. McCarron, McElwain recruited him. Guess who else got to play with him after McElwain left? Doug Nussmeier. So, there's connections there for A.J. McCarron, a player in the NFL who got to work with McElwain and Doug Nussmeier there. So, Joey, I think the next thing we can hit on, which has been the most popular topic, is going forward besides Jarrett Stidham, and I mentioned this is going to be a kind of quarterback-heavy show. And I'll just come straight up to you. It can be a point counterpoint. We may actually agree on this too. Do you take the red shirt off of Feleipe Franks
for the bowl game?
For the bowl game, yep, for the bowl game.
I agree with you. It depends on what happens with Stidham. I think you prepare Franks as the starter, both of them, and if you get Stidham to commit, you play Appleby. Goes to Auburn or some mystery school. I think you roll with Franks. I think you have to not only will you get him experience in a game before spring practice starts, you'll get the fan base excited in the offseason, and you'll get recruits to notice what the future is going to look like before signing day. That is so important. I tweeted this out earlier. Recruits aren't dumb. No, they watch games. They watch film. It out during the SEC championship game. I can't wait to play in this game next year. Was that code for, he's going to try to win with Auburn, or he's going to be back in the SEC championship with Florida? We don't know. Recruits watch games. They know if you're a wide receiver like Donovan Peoples-Jones, Appleby play in the Outback Bowl, are you going to get excited about the future of Florida football, or are you going to get excited when you see six Feleipe Franks out there slinging 70-yard bombs, and know that he's going to be there for the next 3 years? So all depends, like you said, on what Stidham does. And he is an early enrollee. I think what he's going to do, apparently hit people close to him from what I've heard this week, is he wants to make a decision before Christmas.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I can see that. He wants to be early enrolled and be in school in January, so I think that would help the coach's decision on Franks. I lean, and a month ago you asked me this, and I said you can't burn a red shirt this late. But one of my sticklers for holding myself totally against that was, if a big time quarterbacks don't necessarily stay all 4 years anyway. And McElwain mentioned in his SEC championship press conference that they're going to have to sit down and talk to his parents and all that. And I mentioned on the previous podcast, yes, football is, and I don't care what anybody says, football is first in a football player's mind, but academics still come into play a little bit with this. So, does his major, kind of hold him into where he maybe wants to stay 4 or 5 years? And if that's the case, that's another reason to redshirt. And academics can't be lost here as well. It's a university, and redshirt, goes into academics as well. So if there's something that where he wants to stay in school for a while and he wants to redshirt so he can concentrate on academics, then more power to him. That's what he's going to school for anyway. But once they sit down and Feleipe Franks wants to play and the coaching staff wants to give him that chance to play, and I think if they all sign up for it and make that decision, I think it's no harm, no foul. I've heard on Jacksonville radio saying, it could be another Jeff Driscoll type. If you don't redshirt him, he wouldn't have that chance to go be a grad transfer somewhere else and improve his potential draft stock. I get that point as well, and I'm sure that will go into the decision of whether to play or not. But you mentioned the excitement, Joey. I think it will excite Gator Nation to see one of their true freshmen, the highly touted true freshmen, go in and play. But what happens if it doesn't look good?
At least you know what you have, though. You know what I'm saying? I think it's better to know than not know. I just want to know.
Yeah.
This recruiting this recruiting cycle offensively has to be huge for McElwain, because defensively it's going to be really weird. Also, I do want to break some news, so to say. I am hearing from people inside the program that there's going to be a big name player that's going to come back next year. I don't know who it is, but it's going to be a pretty big surprise. He wants to get his degree. You know, it is. I was not told who it is, but I was told that that player is heavily leaning towards returning for his senior year next year on defense. Yes, take your pick of who you think it could be, but I was told that this week, and I was told that by Marcus's May's brother. You know, so obviously I trust him. I know that he knows. You know, Marcus is the leader of the defense. He's, you know, so. But just take that for what it's worth. There's a few names that are sticking out in your head, but
I won't spend too much time on it. But if it's me, my first thought is maybe Quincy Wilson, because his brother's coming to play, and maybe he wants to play 1 year with his brother. That's my only thought to go along with that. Maybe Quincy, so he can play with his brother Marco for a year there, maybe. But, you know, I saw some pictures after the SEC championship game where Jalen Tabor, you know, was kind of distraught. He had some tears rolling down his face. Could that have, you know, meant because the realization that, you know, the season's over, you know, his career at Florida's almost over. But yeah, there's some players there. I guess you could throw in Alex Anzalone, Jared Davis, Jared Davis,
Caleb Brantley.
Yeah, my bad.
I'll throw in Caleb Brantley.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, him and Jonathan Bullard were really, really tight. Jonathan Bullard was supposed to be a late first round pick, came back for his senior year. Yeah. So, you know, I could possibly see something like that, but I was told there's somebody's leaning towards staying right now, and it's a big name defensive player. So I don't know who it is, you know, but I will say that that's what I was told. You know, take that for what it's worth. But the defense is still going to be in some kind of rough shape next year. We're going to have to see what happens with the defensive coaches. Maybe, you know, hopefully we get Randy Shannon stays. I don't know what his situation possibly could be. You know, that FAU job is still lurking out there. You know, his name came up, and I told you that I think he would be a bigger loss than Jeff Collins would be for purposes. So, you know, we just don't know, you know, what that situation is going to come up. So I think we're going to be score 30, 40 points next year, Dave. I really do.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say Jared Davis on that name of potential guys who could stay, because he came back for his senior year this past year. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we know this offense is, you know, and we've mentioned it, year 3 is kind of do or die for Jim McElwain in this offense. Not do or die for his career. I mean, he probably definitely gets one more season just because of the 2 back-to-back SEC East crowns. But, you know, to kind of ease the fan base a little bit, next year the improvement on offense is going to have to show, because we mentioned there are some talented guys, young guys on defense, but they are losing a lot. So, you know, it won't be – I think the defense will still be good to very good. Florida rarely has a defense that's not good, at least good. 2007 is probably the last year you can go back and, you know, even say Florida had a subpar defense. But if you go back and look at the history, Florida has had good defenses. So I don't think they'll drop off a lot. They won't be elite, but I still think they can be good to very good. So Gators Breakdown, you can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud. You can find myself, David Waters, on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Joey, where can they find you on Twitter? And you know, we've even had some fans of ours or some followers now who want to interact with us on Twitter. So I thought that was kind of cool there.
Absolutely. Joey_Sports Talk. You could find me on the SEC Breakdown Twitter feed. David's always tweeting things to me. So, but I want to say thank you to all our listeners out there who stuck with us all season long. It's been a great season. I know it's been a big letdown this year, but we did get back to Atlanta, for a second straight year. McElwain haters and want to fire Jim McElwain out there. Just calm down. Give him a chance to get a quarterback next year, and one that he can actually win with, and then we'll judge how he's going to do. I always told you, David, all year that it's year 3. That's what I'm going to judge him on. So at this time next year, we'll either be talking about hot seat or extension.
Yeah, I think so. They say, yeah. Andres Rodriguez was the guy who followed us. Joey, he searched on Twitter. He said he even got a Twitter account so he can interact with you and I because of this Gators Breakdown podcast. So, it's listeners. Yeah, it's listeners like that who one reason we want to keep this thing going. We have fun with it more than anything. So thanks for the follows out there, and thanks for the interaction on Twitter. Don't be afraid to tweet stuff to us. We may not agree with it. We may agree with it. We'll talk about it on the show. It's all about having an opinion, and we can make it healthy. Believe me.
For the preview show for the bowl game, we'll have our old friend Mark Moses on, who used to cover the Big Ten.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Radio 1560. So he knows Kirk Ferentz in Iowa very well. He lived in Iowa. He covered Iowa. He covered the Big Ten, so he knows, and we'll get his insight.
Oh, good. Mark was very good for our FSU preview. So there, and I got to follow Iowa for about 3 or 4 days when they were here in Jacksonville for the Tax Slayer Bowl a couple years ago. So kind of a little bit coming full circle there. I got to know some of those coaches, follow them around for a few days when they were here in Jacksonville. So, all right, Gators Breakdown episode 27 in the books. Will the quarterback situation get better? Jarrett Stidham, Feleipe Franks are the big hot talk items. So this episode's in the books, and I'm glad you could join us here on Gators Breakdown.